Question 1. Governance review demonstrates that KGHM Polska Miedz is planning a significant expansion of its mining operations. The review highlights a need to assess the potential environmental consequences of this expansion, particularly concerning water usage and waste disposal, in accordance with Polish regulatory requirements. Which of the following approaches best addresses the company's responsibilities? Option A. Initiate a public relations campaign to highlight the economic benefits of the expansion, downplaying any potential environmental risks until they become unavoidable. Option B. Conduct a thorough environmental impact assessment (IA) in strict adherence to the Polish environmental protection law, engaging independent environmental experts and transparently communicating findings to relevant authorities and local communities. Option C. Commission a limited internal review of potential environmental impacts, focusing primarily on cost-saving measures for waste disposal, and disclose findings only if legally mandated. Option D. Proceed with the expansion based on historical operational data, assuming similar environmental impacts as past projects, and only address concerns if they arise during operation. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough environmental impact assessment (IA) in strict adherence to the Polish environmental protection law, engaging independent environmental experts and transparently communicating findings to relevant authorities and local communities. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires KGHM Polska Miedz to balance its operational needs with its legal and ethical obligations concerning environmental impact and stakeholder communication. The company must navigate complex Polish environmental regulations and corporate governance best practices to ensure transparency and responsible resource management. Careful judgment is required to avoid potential legal repercussions, reputational damage, and loss of stakeholder trust. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive impact assessment that adheres strictly to Polish environmental law and KGHM internal governance policies. This includes thorough data collection, expert analysis, and transparent communication with relevant authorities and stakeholders. The regulatory justification lies in compliance with the Polish environmental protection law, Prawo ochrony środowiska, and related directives, which mandate impact assessments for projects that may significantly affect the environment. Ethically, this approach upholds principles of corporate social responsibility and transparency. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing immediate operational costs without a proper environmental impact assessment would fail to comply with Polish environmental legislation. This could lead to fines, project delays, and legal challenges from regulatory bodies and environmental groups. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying or obscuring the disclosure of potential negative environmental impacts to stakeholders, violates principles of corporate transparency and good governance, potentially damaging KGHM reputation and leading to a loss of investor confidence. A third incorrect approach, which relies on outdated or incomplete environmental data, risks misrepresenting the true impact of the project and failing to implement adequate mitigation measures, thereby contravening the precautionary principle often embedded in environmental regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance, ethical conduct, and stakeholder engagement. This involves understanding the specific legal requirements of the Polish jurisdiction, conducting thorough due diligence, seeking expert advice, and fostering open communication channels. When faced with potential environmental impacts, the framework should guide towards proactive mitigation and transparent reporting rather than reactive damage control. Question 2. Governance review demonstrates that KGHM Polska Miedz is considering a significant expansion of its mining operations. This expansion is projected to increase production capacity, but may also have potential environmental implications for the surrounding region. The company is evaluating different approaches to proceed with this expansion. Which of the following approaches best aligns with KGHM Polska Miedz's regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities in Poland? Option A. Initiate the expansion immediately to gain a competitive advantage, and then conduct a post-expansion environmental audit to identify and address any issues, relying on regulatory bodies to guide any necessary remediation efforts. Option B. Conduct a thorough environmental impact assessment (IA), as mandated by Polish law, Engage in proactive and transparent consultation with all relevant stakeholders, including local communities and environmental agencies, and integrate mitigation measures identified in the EIA into the expansion plan. Option C. Focus solely on the engineering and geological feasibility of the expansion, assuming that any environmental impacts will be manageable through standard operational procedures without the need for a formal, in-depth assessment or extensive stakeholder consultation. Option D. Proceed with the expansion based on internal technical assessments, prioritizing speed of execution and cost-effectiveness, and address any environmental concerns that arise only if they become legally mandated or significantly impact operations. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough environmental impact assessment, IA, as mandated by Polish law. Engage in proactive and transparent consultation with all relevant stakeholders, including local communities and environmental agencies, and integrate mitigation measures identified in the EIA into the expansion plan. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires KGHM Polska Miedz to balance its operational needs with its legal and ethical obligations concerning environmental impact and stakeholder communication. The company must ensure that its decision-making process is not only efficient, but also transparent and compliant with Polish environmental regulations and corporate governance best practices. Careful judgment is required to avoid potential legal repercussions, reputational damage, and erosion of public trust. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive assessment of the environmental impact of the proposed expansion, followed by transparent communication with all relevant stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, local communities, and employees. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible corporate citizenship and the spirit of Polish environmental law, which emphasizes prevention, mitigation, and public participation. By conducting a thorough impact assessment, KGHM Polska Miedz can identify potential risks, develop appropriate mitigation strategies, and demonstrate its commitment to sustainable development. Engaging stakeholders early and openly fosters trust and allows for the incorporation of valuable feedback, leading to more robust and socially acceptable outcomes. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings over a thorough environmental impact assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would violate the precautionary principle embedded in environmental law, which mandates that potential environmental harm should be prevented even in the absence of full scientific certainty. It would also disregard the legal requirement for environmental impact assessments for projects of this nature, potentially leading to fines, project delays, or even outright cancellation. Furthermore, neglecting stakeholder consultation would breach ethical obligations and could result in significant reputational damage, as communities and environmental groups would likely react negatively to a perceived lack of transparency and disregard for their concerns. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on internal technical feasibility without considering broader environmental and social implications, would also be professionally unsound. While technical expertise is crucial, it is insufficient on its own. Environmental and social impacts are integral components of any responsible expansion project. Ignoring these aspects would represent a failure to adhere to the integrated approach to environmental management promoted by Polish regulations and international best practices. This could lead to unforeseen environmental consequences that are costly to rectify and damage KGHM Polska Miedz's long-term sustainability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, multidisciplinary approach. This includes 1. Clearly defining the project scope and objectives. 2. Identifying all relevant legal and regulatory requirements, particularly those related to environmental protection and stakeholder engagement under Polish law. 3. Conducting a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment, involving expert analysis and consideration of potential cumulative effects. 4. Developing a robust stakeholder engagement plan, ensuring timely and meaningful consultation with all affected parties. 5. Integrating findings from the impact assessment and stakeholder feedback into the project design and mitigation strategies. 6. Establishing clear communication channels to keep stakeholders informed throughout the project lifecycle. 7. Continuously monitoring and evaluating environmental performance and adapting strategies as needed. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that KGHM Polska Miedz has identified potential weaknesses in its internal control framework related to the timely reporting of significant operational changes. Which of the following approaches best addresses these findings in compliance with Polish corporate governance regulations and EU market abuse directives? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive, documented investigation into the identified control weaknesses, engaging independent legal and compliance expertise to develop and implement a detailed remediation plan. Option B. Immediately disclose the preliminary findings of the governance review to the public and the market without a full investigation to ensure maximum transparency. Option C. Acknowledge the findings internally and rely on existing management assurances that the issues are minor and will be addressed through ongoing operational adjustments. Option D. Implement superficial procedural updates to the reporting process without conducting a root cause analysis or engaging external expertise. Correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive, documented investigation into the identified control weaknesses, engaging independent legal and compliance expertise to develop and implement a detailed remediation plan. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because KGHM Polska Miedz, as a publicly traded entity, operates under stringent Polish corporate governance regulations and the overarching framework of the European Union's market abuse directives. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate disclosure of material information with the potential for market manipulation or insider trading. A governance review highlighting potential weaknesses requires immediate and decisive action to uphold regulatory compliance and investor confidence. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation into the identified governance weaknesses, engaging independent legal and compliance expertise, and developing a remediation plan that addresses the root causes of the issues. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance mandated by Polish law, e.g., the Commercial Companies Code, regulations of the Warsaw Stock Exchange, and EU regulations like MAR, Market Abuse Regulation. The emphasis on documentation and independent review ensures transparency, accountability, and adherence to legal obligations regarding internal controls and disclosure. An incorrect approach of downplaying the findings and relying solely on internal assurances fails to meet the regulatory requirement for robust internal control mechanisms and timely rectification of identified deficiencies. This could lead to breaches of disclosure obligations and potentially expose KGHM Polska Miedz to regulatory sanctions and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, that of immediately disclosing the preliminary findings without a comprehensive investigation, could prematurely alarm stakeholders, potentially lead to market volatility based on incomplete information, and violate principles of responsible disclosure which require verified and substantiated information. A third incorrect approach, focusing only on superficial procedural changes without addressing the underlying systemic issues, would not satisfy the spirit or letter of regulatory expectations for effective governance and risk management. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes regulatory compliance, ethical conduct, and stakeholder protection. This involves 1. Acknowledging and formally documenting the governance review findings. 2. Initiating a comprehensive, objective investigation, potentially involving external specialists. 3. Developing and implementing a robust remediation plan with clear timelines and responsibilities. 4. Ensuring all actions are documented and align with relevant Polish and EU regulations. 5. Communicating transparently with relevant stakeholders as appropriate and legally required. Question 4. Governance review demonstrates that KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. is planning a new mining exploration project in a region with sensitive ecological zones and a significant local community presence. To ensure compliance and responsible development, which of the following approaches to impact assessment and stakeholder engagement is most appropriate? Option A. Prioritize the speed of exploration by deferring detailed impact assessments and stakeholder engagement until after initial exploration activities have commenced. Option B. Rely solely on historical environmental data from similar projects, assuming that current conditions will not present unique challenges, and engage stakeholders only if significant opposition arises. Option C. Undertake a streamlined impact assessment focusing only on the most obvious environmental risks, with limited consultation primarily through official public notices. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment that includes extensive consultation with regulatory bodies, local communities, and environmental experts, and integrate findings into project planning and mitigation strategies. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment that includes extensive consultation with regulatory bodies, local communities, and environmental experts, and integrate findings into project planning and mitigation strategies. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. operates within a highly regulated environment, and any deviation from established governance and compliance frameworks can lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. The core of the challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to regulatory requirements, particularly concerning environmental impact assessments and stakeholder engagement. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions are not only legally compliant, but also ethically sound and aligned with the company's long-term sustainability goals. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive impact assessment that integrates regulatory compliance with stakeholder consultation. This approach is right because it directly addresses the findings of the governance review by ensuring that potential environmental and social impacts are identified, evaluated, and mitigated in accordance with Polish and EU environmental law, as well as relevant industry best practices. Proactive engagement with regulatory bodies and affected communities fosters transparency and builds trust, which are crucial for obtaining necessary permits and maintaining social license to operate. This aligns with the principles of responsible corporate governance and sustainable development, which are increasingly emphasized by regulatory frameworks. An incorrect approach that prioritizes expediency over thoroughness would fail to adequately identify and address potential risks. This could lead to non-compliance with environmental regulations, resulting in fines, project delays, or even outright rejection of development plans. Another incorrect approach, which involves minimal or superficial stakeholder consultation, risks alienating local communities and non-governmental organizations, potentially leading to protracted disputes and negative publicity. This undermines the company's social license to operate and can create significant operational hurdles. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on meeting minimum legal requirements without considering broader sustainability principles or potential future regulatory changes, is short-sighted. While technically compliant in the short term, it fails to build resilience and can expose KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. to future risks and reputational damage as societal expectations and regulatory landscapes evolve. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape, including national laws of Poland and relevant EU directives. This should be followed by a risk-based assessment of potential impacts, incorporating input from internal experts and external consultants. Crucially, this assessment must include a robust stakeholder engagement plan, designed to solicit feedback and address concerns from all relevant parties, including local communities, environmental groups, and regulatory agencies. The final decision-making process should prioritize approaches that demonstrate a commitment to environmental stewardship, social responsibility, and long-term value creation, ensuring that all actions are defensible from both a legal and ethical standpoint. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for increased dust emissions from a new mining operation at KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. that could exceed permissible levels under specific weather conditions. Which of the following communication and action approaches best aligns with Polish regulatory frameworks and professional ethical standards for KGHM Polska Miedz S.A.? Option A. Focus communication efforts solely on internal engineering teams to resolve the issue, assuming that external communication is unnecessary until a definitive solution is found. Option B. Immediately inform the relevant Polish environmental protection authorities and local community representatives about the potential risk, detailing the specific conditions under which emissions might exceed limits and outlining the mitigation strategies KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. is implementing. Option C. Issue a general statement to the public acknowledging that dust emissions are a normal part of mining operations, without specifying the potential for exceedances or detailing mitigation efforts. Option D. Wait for actual exceedances to occur before initiating any communication, and then only report the incident to the authorities as required by law. The correct answer is B. Immediately inform the relevant Polish environmental protection authorities and local community representatives about the potential risk, detailing the specific conditions under which emissions might exceed limits and outlining the mitigation strategies KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. is implementing. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. operates within a highly regulated environment, particularly concerning environmental impact and stakeholder communication. The challenge lies in balancing the need for transparency with the potential for negative public perception and regulatory scrutiny. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all communications are accurate, timely, and compliant with Polish environmental regulations and corporate governance standards. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy that acknowledges the potential environmental impact, outlines mitigation measures, and engages with relevant stakeholders. This aligns with the principles of responsible corporate citizenship and regulatory compliance, which mandate open communication regarding environmental incidents or potential risks. Specifically, Polish environmental law often requires reporting and public consultation on projects with significant environmental implications. Ethical considerations also demand honesty and a commitment to minimizing harm. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on downplaying the impact or delaying communication would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to disclose potential risks or impacts violates principles of transparency and could lead to regulatory penalties under Polish environmental legislation. Furthermore, withholding information or misrepresenting the situation erodes trust with stakeholders, including local communities and regulatory bodies, and could result in reputational damage for KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. Another incorrect approach that involves communicating only with internal stakeholders without informing the public or regulatory bodies is also flawed. This bypasses legal obligations for public disclosure and consultation, which are often stipulated in environmental permits and regulations. It also fails to uphold ethical standards of accountability and stakeholder engagement. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Immediate assessment of the potential environmental impact and regulatory reporting requirements. 2. Development of a clear, accurate, and timely communication plan that addresses all relevant stakeholders, including regulatory authorities and the public. 3. Consultation with legal and environmental experts to ensure compliance with all applicable Polish laws and regulations. 4. Proactive engagement with affected communities to address concerns and build trust. Question 6. The evaluation methodology shows that KGHM Polska Miedz is planning a new extraction project. Which approach to assessing the potential environmental impact of this project best aligns with Polish regulatory frameworks and ethical considerations for responsible mining operations? Option A. Prioritize immediate stakeholder satisfaction by agreeing to all environmental demands, regardless of scientific evidence or legal feasibility. Option B. Undertake a comprehensive environmental impact assessment (IA) in strict accordance with the Polish Act on Environmental Information and Public Participation and relevant EU directives, including detailed baseline studies, impact prediction, mitigation planning, and public consultation. Option C. Conduct a preliminary economic feasibility study and proceed with the project if profitable, addressing environmental concerns only if they become significant operational issues. Option D. Utilize existing, general environmental data from similar mining regions without conducting site-specific studies or considering the unique characteristics of the proposed project location. The correct answer is C. Conduct a preliminary economic feasibility study and proceed with the project if profitable, addressing environmental concerns only if they become significant operational issues. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for KGHM Polska Miedz employees involved in assessing the impact of a new mining project on local ecosystems. The challenge lies in balancing the company's operational and economic objectives with its legal and ethical obligations to protect the environment. Employees must navigate complex environmental regulations, scientific uncertainties, and potential stakeholder concerns. The need for a robust and compliant impact assessment is paramount to ensure the project's long-term sustainability and KGHM reputation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive environmental impact assessment (IA) that strictly adheres to Polish environmental law, specifically the Act on Environmental Information and its public participation, and relevant EU directives transposed into Polish legislation. This process requires detailed baseline studies, identification of potential significant environmental impacts, e.g., on water resources, biodiversity, air quality, soil, and the development of mitigation and monitoring measures. The assessment must be transparent, involve public consultation, and be submitted to the relevant environmental authorities for approval. This approach ensures legal compliance, promotes responsible resource management, and fosters stakeholder trust by demonstrating a commitment to environmental stewardship. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on economic feasibility without a thorough environmental assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Polish law mandates EIA for projects likely to have a significant impact on the environment. Ignoring this requirement exposes KGHM to legal penalties, project delays, and reputational damage. Prioritizing stakeholder appeasement over scientific rigor and legal requirements is also problematic. While stakeholder engagement is crucial, decisions must be grounded in objective environmental data and legal mandates. Adopting a purely appeasement-driven approach risks overlooking critical environmental risks or making commitments that are not legally or technically feasible, potentially leading to future noncompliance. Relying on outdated or incomplete environmental data without updating it to reflect current conditions or project specifics is another failure. Environmental regulations require assessments based on the most current and relevant information. Using outdated data can lead to an inaccurate understanding of potential impacts, resulting in inadequate mitigation strategies and potential breaches of environmental standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals at KGHM Polska Miedz should adopt a systematic, legally compliant, and ethically sound approach to environmental impact assessment. This involves 1. Understanding and strictly adhering to all relevant Polish and EU environmental legislation. 2. Engaging qualified environmental experts to conduct thorough baseline studies and impact predictions. 3. Implementing a robust public consultation process as mandated by law. 4. Developing comprehensive mitigation and monitoring plans based on scientific evidence and regulatory requirements. 5. Maintaining transparency and open communication with regulatory bodies and stakeholders throughout the assessment process. 6. Continuously reviewing and updating the assessment as new information becomes available or project plans evolve. Question 7. Governance review demonstrates that KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. is considering a significant alteration to its tailings management process that could potentially impact local water resources. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and best practices for managing such a change? Option A. Postpone the formal impact assessment until after the new process has been operational for a period. Gather real-world data on its effects. Option B. Conduct informal discussions with local community representatives to gauge their potential concerns and proceed with the changes if no immediate objections are raised. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, IA, in accordance with the Polish environmental protection law, engaging all necessary authorities and stakeholders to identify, evaluate, and mitigate potential environmental effects before proceeding with any operational changes. Option D. Immediately implement the proposed process changes to realize cost efficiencies and address any environmental concerns that may arise subsequently through reactive measures. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement the proposed process changes to realize cost efficiencies and address any environmental concerns that may arise subsequently through reactive measures. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. operates within a highly regulated environment where adherence to specific Polish and EU mining and environmental laws is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency and potential cost savings with the absolute requirement to comply with stringent environmental impact assessment (IA) procedures. A failure to conduct a thorough and compliant EIA can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions, including potential project suspension. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and proactive impact assessment that strictly adheres to the Polish environmental protection law, prawo ochrony środowiska, and relevant EU directives transposed into Polish law. This approach prioritizes identifying all potential environmental impacts, consulting with relevant authorities and stakeholders, and developing robust mitigation measures before any significant operational changes are implemented. This aligns with the precautionary principle and the legal obligation to prevent environmental harm, ensuring that KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. operates responsibly and sustainably, thereby safeguarding its license to operate and its long-term viability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without a proper impact assessment would fail to meet the legal requirements of the environmental protection law. This would constitute a direct violation of the obligation to conduct an EIA for significant operational changes that could affect the environment. Such an approach risks severe penalties, including fines and injunctions, and demonstrates a disregard for environmental stewardship and corporate social responsibility. Another incorrect approach that relies on informal consultations or assumptions about minimal impact would also be professionally unacceptable. The law mandates formal procedures for EIA, including public consultations and expert reviews. Bypassing these formal processes, even with good intentions, undermines the integrity of the regulatory framework and exposes KGHM Polska Miedz S.A. to legal challenges and public distrust. A third incorrect approach that delays the impact assessment until after operational changes have begun is fundamentally flawed. The purpose of an EIA is to inform decision-making prior to implementation. Post-implementation assessment is reactive and cannot adequately address potential harm that has already occurred or is ongoing, leading to greater remediation costs and legal complications. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, a commitment to ethical conduct, and a proactive risk management strategy. This means prioritizing compliance, engaging with legal and environmental experts, and ensuring that all operational decisions are informed by a thorough and legally sound impact assessment process. Question 8. Governance review demonstrates that KGHM Polska Miedz has developed a novel, potentially disruptive technology in its mining operations. This technology could significantly reduce operational costs and increase extraction efficiency. What is the most appropriate course of action for KGHM Polska Miedz regarding the disclosure of this development to the market? Option A. Delay public disclosure until the technology is fully implemented and its benefits are definitively proven, to avoid premature market speculation. Option B. Communicate the existence of the technology to the market, but emphasize its early stage of development and uncertain future impact to mitigate potential volatility. Option C. Inform key institutional investors and financial analysts about the technology's potential benefits before making a public announcement to gauge market reaction. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive internal assessment of the technology's potential impact, and if deemed material, disclose it to the public through appropriate channels in accordance with regulatory requirements. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive internal assessment of the technology's potential impact, and if deemed material, disclose it to the public through appropriate channels in accordance with regulatory requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because KGHM Polska Miedz, as a publicly listed company operating in a regulated industry, must adhere to stringent governance and disclosure requirements. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate reporting of material information with the potential for market manipulation or insider trading if information is disclosed prematurely or selectively. Careful judgment is required to determine what constitutes material information and the appropriate timing and method of its dissemination. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the potential impact of the new technology on KGHM Polska, Miedz's operations, financial performance, and market position. This assessment should be conducted by a designated team with relevant expertise, ensuring that all potential implications are considered. Once the materiality is established, the information must be disclosed to the public in a manner that ensures equal access for all market participants, adhering to the regulations set forth by the relevant Polish Financial Market Authority, e.g., Komisja Nadzoru Finansowego KNF, and stock exchange rules. This approach upholds transparency, fairness, and market integrity, which are fundamental ethical and regulatory principles. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disclose the information to a select group of stakeholders, such as major shareholders or analysts, before a public announcement. This constitutes selective disclosure and can lead to insider trading concerns, violating principles of market fairness, and potentially breaching KNF regulations regarding the dissemination of inside information. Another incorrect approach would be to delay disclosure indefinitely, hoping to gain a competitive advantage or to further refine the technology before informing the market. Such a delay, if the information is material, would be a breach of disclosure obligations and could mislead investors. Finally, downplaying the significance of the technology to avoid market volatility, even if it has a material impact, would be a failure of transparency and could be considered market manipulation, contravening regulatory expectations for accurate and complete reporting. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves establishing clear internal policies for information handling and disclosure, defining roles and responsibilities for assessing materiality, and creating a robust process for timely and equitable public dissemination of material information. When faced with new developments, the first step is to identify the potential impact and assess its materiality against established criteria. If deemed material, the next step is to consult with legal and compliance departments to ensure adherence to all disclosure obligations before any communication is made to the market. Question 9. Governance review demonstrates that KGHM Polska Miedz is facing an urgent need for specialized mining equipment due to an unforeseen operational disruption. A potential supplier has presented a proposal that appears cost-effective and promises rapid delivery. However, initial inquiries suggest that the supplier's corporate structure is complex and their track record is not widely documented. In this situation, what is the most appropriate course of action for KGHM Polska Miedz procurement officers to ensure compliance with Polish regulatory frameworks and ethical business practices? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive due diligence process on the proposed supplier, including verification of their legal standing, financial stability, and reputation, while simultaneously exploring alternative, pre-qualified suppliers for comparison, even if it slightly delays the immediate procurement. Option B. Accept the supplier's proposal based on the urgency and perceived cost savings, and conduct a post-award review of their credentials to confirm compliance. Option C. Proceed with the contract award to the proposed supplier immediately to mitigate operational losses, assuming the offer's competitiveness outweighs the need for extensive due diligence. Option D. Seek a personal recommendation from a senior industry contact, known to the procurement officer, to validate the supplier's reliability before proceeding. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the contract award to the proposed supplier immediately to mitigate operational losses, assuming the offer's competitiveness outweighs the need for extensive due diligence. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for KGHM Polska Miedz employees involved in procurement and supply chain management. The challenge lies in balancing the company's need for cost efficiency and operational continuity with the imperative to uphold ethical business practices and comply with Polish anti-corruption regulations. The pressure to secure essential supplies quickly, especially in a potentially volatile market, can create an environment where shortcuts or ethically questionable decisions might seem appealing. However, the regulatory framework strictly prohibits such actions, and failure to adhere can lead to severe legal consequences for both individuals and the company, including reputational damage and financial penalties. Careful judgment is required to navigate these pressures while remaining compliant. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough due diligence process for all new suppliers, regardless of the urgency of the need. This includes verifying the supplier's legal standing, financial stability, and reputation, as well as conducting background checks on key individuals associated with the supplier. Crucially, it requires obtaining multiple competitive bids and documenting the entire selection process transparently. This approach is justified by Polish law, specifically the Act on Public Procurement, Prawo zamówień publicznych, and the Act on Combating Unfair Competition, Ustawa o zwalczaniu nieuczciwej konkurencji, which mandate fair competition, transparency, and the prevention of corruption. Adhering to these principles ensures that KGHM Polska Miedz selects suppliers based on merit, quality, and price, while minimizing the risk of engaging with entities involved in illicit activities. Ethical considerations also dictate that the company should not engage with suppliers who may be involved in bribery or other corrupt practices, as this would undermine the integrity of its operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that bypasses standard due diligence and directly awards a contract to a supplier based solely on a perceived urgent need, and a single, albeit competitive sounding, offer fails to meet regulatory requirements. This bypasses the mandated competitive bidding process and the necessary verification of the supplier's legitimacy, creating a significant risk of engaging with a fraudulent or corrupt entity. Such an action directly contravenes the principles of transparency and fair competition enshrined in Polish procurement law. Another incorrect approach would be to accept a supplier's offer without independently verifying their credentials or reputation, especially if there are any red flags or unusual terms. This demonstrates a lack of professional skepticism and a failure to conduct adequate due diligence, which is a cornerstone of ethical and legal procurement. It opens KGHM Polska Miedz to the risk of association with unethical practices and potential legal liabilities. Finally, an approach that involves accepting a supplier's offer based on a personal recommendation from an individual with a potential conflict of interest, without independent verification, is also professionally unacceptable. This introduces bias into the selection process and bypasses objective evaluation criteria, violating principles of fairness and potentially exposing the company to corruption risks, as personal relationships can be exploited for illicit gain. Professional reasoning. Professionals at KGHM Polska Miedz should adopt a risk-based approach to procurement, always prioritizing compliance with Polish law and ethical standards. When faced with urgent supply needs, the decision-making process should involve 1. Clearly defining the essential requirements and the acceptable timeframe. 2. Exploring all available procurement channels, including expedited but still compliant processes, to solicit multiple bids. 3. Conducting a robust, albeit potentially accelerated, due diligence on shortlisted suppliers, focusing on verifying their legal status, financial health, and reputation. 4. Documenting every step of the process, including the rationale for supplier selection, to ensure transparency and accountability. If an urgent need cannot be met through compliant expedited processes, the professional should escalate the issue to higher management with a clear explanation of the risks and potential solutions, rather than resorting to circumventing established procedures. Question 10. Upon reviewing the proposed expansion of KGHM Polska Miedz's copper extraction operations in a region with sensitive groundwater resources, what is the most appropriate initial step to ensure compliance with Polish environmental protection regulations regarding potential impacts on water quality and quantity? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, IA, process in accordance with the Polish environmental protection law, engaging relevant authorities and stakeholders. Option B. Conduct a brief review of publicly available hydrological data for the region and assume no significant impact. Option C. Rely on informal discussions with local community leaders to gauge potential concerns about water usage. Option D. Prioritize the economic feasibility study for the expansion, assuming environmental concerns can be addressed later if they arise. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive environmental impact assessment IA, process in accordance with the Polish environmental protection law, engaging relevant authorities and stakeholders. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for KGHM Polska Miedz employees tasked with assessing the potential impact of a new mining project on local water resources. The challenge lies in balancing the company's operational objectives with its legal and ethical obligations to protect the environment and comply with Polish environmental regulations. Accurate impact assessment is crucial for informed decision-making, risk mitigation, and maintaining stakeholder trust. Failure to conduct a thorough and compliant assessment can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and harm to the environment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, IA, that strictly adheres to the Polish environmental protection law, prawo ochrony środowiska, and relevant EU directives transposed into Polish law. This process mandates a detailed analysis of potential impacts on water bodies, including surface and groundwater, considering factors like water quality, quantity, flow regimes, and aquatic ecosystems. It requires consultation with relevant authorities, public participation, and the development of mitigation measures. This approach is correct because it is legally mandated, promotes sustainable development, and ensures that potential environmental risks are identified and managed proactively, aligning with KGHM responsibilities under Polish law. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on economic feasibility without a robust environmental assessment is incorrect because it directly violates the Polish environmental protection law, which requires EIA for projects with potential significant environmental impacts. This approach prioritizes profit over legal compliance and environmental stewardship, leading to potential legal sanctions and ecological damage. Conducting a superficial review of existing data without site-specific investigations or predictive modeling is incorrect. While existing data is a starting point, Polish regulations often require detailed, project-specific studies to accurately predict impacts. This approach risks underestimating or overlooking critical environmental risks, failing to meet the due diligence standards required by law. Relying on anecdotal evidence or informal consultations with local residents without a structured, legally recognized impact assessment process is incorrect. While community engagement is important, it cannot substitute for the formal EIA process mandated by Polish law, which involves scientific methodologies and official reporting. This approach lacks the rigor and legal standing necessary for compliance and effective environmental management. Professional reasoning. Professionals at KGHM Polska Miedz should approach impact assessments by first identifying the relevant Polish environmental legislation and any applicable EU directives. They must then design an assessment methodology that aligns with these legal requirements, ensuring it includes all necessary components such as baseline studies, impact prediction, and mitigation planning. Engaging with environmental experts and regulatory bodies early in the process is crucial for ensuring compliance and gathering necessary input. A structured, evidence-based approach, documented thoroughly, is essential for demonstrating due diligence and responsible corporate behavior. Question 11. Quality control measures reveal a potential, albeit minor, deviation in the purity of a recent copper concentrate batch produced by KGHM Polska Miedz. While the deviation is currently within acceptable internal tolerances for immediate processing, it could, if unaddressed, lead to a more significant quality issue in future batches and potentially impact downstream product specifications. The production manager is concerned about meeting quarterly targets and suggests delaying the formal reporting of this finding until a more comprehensive analysis can be completed, arguing that it might resolve itself or be minor enough not to warrant immediate external notification. Option A. Immediately escalate the quality control finding to the relevant internal compliance and legal departments for assessment, and to initiate the process for appropriate disclosure to regulatory bodies and the market, as per KGHM internal policies and relevant Polish and EU regulations. Option B. Proceed with meeting the quarterly production targets as planned, and if the issue is still present at the end of the quarter, then include it in the regular financial reporting with a note about potential future impacts. Option C. Instruct the quality control team to conduct a more in-depth, but discreet, investigation and only report the issue internally if the problem escalates significantly, thereby avoiding unnecessary market concern. Option D. Inform the sales team to subtly adjust product specifications for the affected batch to align with the slight deviation, thereby masking the quality issue without formal reporting. Correct answer is A. Immediately escalate the quality control finding to the relevant internal compliance and legal departments for assessment, and to initiate the process for appropriate disclosure to regulatory bodies and the market, as per KGHM internal policies and relevant Polish and EU regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. KGHM Polska Miedz, as a publicly traded entity, is subject to stringent reporting requirements and ethical standards designed to protect investors and maintain market integrity. The pressure to meet production targets, coupled with the discovery of a potential quality issue, creates a conflict between short-term performance and responsible disclosure. Careful judgment is required to navigate this conflict in a manner that upholds KGHM reputation and adheres to applicable Polish and EU regulations governing financial reporting and corporate conduct. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent reporting of the quality issue to relevant internal stakeholders, and subsequently, to external regulatory bodies, and the market as dictated by law. This approach prioritizes accuracy and integrity in financial and operational reporting. By proactively addressing the issue, KGHM demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, which is crucial for maintaining investor confidence and avoiding potential penalties. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the legal obligations to disclose material information that could impact the company's financial performance or valuation. An incorrect approach of downplaying or delaying the reporting of the quality issue would constitute a failure to comply with regulatory requirements for timely and accurate disclosure. This could be interpreted as misleading the market and investors, potentially leading to severe legal and financial repercussions, including fines, sanctions, and reputational damage. Furthermore, such an approach would violate ethical principles of honesty and transparency, undermining the trust placed in KGHM by its stakeholders. Ignoring the issue or attempting to rectify it without proper disclosure also risks exacerbating the problem and creating a larger crisis later. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the potential impact of the discovered issue on the company's operations, financial statements, and market perception. This should be followed by consulting relevant internal policies and procedures, as well as applicable regulations. Escalating the matter to the appropriate internal departments, e.g., legal, compliance, investor relations, for assessment and guidance is crucial. The ultimate decision should be guided by the principle of transparency and adherence to legal and ethical obligations, ensuring that all material information is disclosed accurately and in a timely manner. Question 12. The control framework reveals that a senior manager at KGHM Polska Miedz has a close personal friendship with the owner of a key supplier company that is bidding for a significant contract. The manager is aware that the supplier's bid is competitive, but also knows that another bidder might offer slightly better terms, though at a higher initial cost. The manager is involved in the final stages of the supplier selection process. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the manager? Option A. Award the contract to the friend's company, assuming their bid is competitive enough to be considered a good value for KGHM Polska Miedz, and not disclose the friendship to avoid potential complications. Option B. Proceed with the selection process as normal, believing that personal relationships should not interfere with objective business decisions, and make the choice based solely on the perceived best overall value for KGHM Polska Miedz. Option C. Disclose the personal relationship to the appropriate oversight body within KGHM Polska Miedz and recuse themselves from any further involvement in the supplier selection process for this contract. Option D. Subtly advocate for the friend's company during internal discussions, highlighting their strengths and downplaying any minor disadvantages, while still ensuring the bid is generally competitive. The correct answer is C. Disclose the personal relationship to the appropriate oversight body within KGHM Polska Miedz and recuse themselves from any further involvement in the supplier selection process for this contract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing KGHM Polska Miedz's operational needs with ethical reporting obligations and potential conflicts of interest. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that information shared internally and externally is accurate, complete, and free from undue influence, especially when personal relationships might be involved. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of financial reporting and maintain stakeholder trust. The correct approach involves transparently disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the relevant oversight body within KGHM Polska Miedz, such as the Audit Committee or the Board of Directors, and recusing oneself from any decision-making processes directly related to the supplier. This upholds the principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct mandated by Polish law and relevant industry best practices for listed companies. Specifically, the Polish Commercial Companies Code, Codex Spółek Handlowych, and the company's internal code of ethics would likely require such disclosure and recusal to prevent self-dealing and ensure objective decision-making. This approach prioritizes the company's best interests and regulatory compliance over personal relationships. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with awarding the contract without disclosure, assuming the supplier's bid is genuinely the best. This fails to address the inherent conflict of interest and violates ethical reporting standards. It could lead to accusations of favoritism, potentially impacting the company's reputation and exposing KGHM Polska Miedz to regulatory scrutiny and legal challenges for breaching fiduciary duties. Another incorrect approach would be to subtly influence the selection process in favor of the friend's company, even if the bid is competitive. This constitutes a breach of integrity and fairness, undermining the procurement process and potentially leading to suboptimal outcomes for KGHM Polska Miedz. Such actions are unethical and could have severe legal repercussions. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation and hope it goes unnoticed. This passive stance is irresponsible and fails to address the ethical and legal obligations. It allows a potential conflict of interest to fester, increasing the risk of future complications and damage to KGHM Polska Miedz's credibility. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest. This should be followed by consulting relevant company policies, codes of conduct, and applicable laws. Transparency and disclosure to appropriate authorities within the organization are paramount. If a conflict exists, recusal from decision-making is the standard ethical and professional response. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are made in the best interest of the company and in compliance with all regulatory and ethical standards. Question 13. Examination of the data shows that KGHM Polska Miedz has identified significant operational inefficiencies in a key mining segment that could impact future production forecasts. The marketing department is preparing a public statement about the company's performance for the upcoming investor relations event. The marketing manager suggests focusing solely on recent cost-saving measures and positive production figures from other segments, while subtly downplaying the identified inefficiencies. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for KGHM Polska Miedz in this situation? Option A. Delay any public mention of the operational inefficiencies until a comprehensive remediation plan is fully implemented and its positive results are demonstrable. Option B. Focus the public statement on positive operational achievements and cost-saving measures, and only mention the inefficiencies in a brief, vague manner, without providing specific details or impact assessments. Option C. Publicly disclose the identified operational inefficiencies, their potential impact on future forecasts, and the steps being taken to address them, while also highlighting positive operational achievements. Option D. Exclude any mention of the operational inefficiencies from the public statement, as they are still under internal review and their ultimate impact is uncertain. The correct answer is C. Publicly disclose the identified operational inefficiencies, their potential impact on future forecasts, and the steps being taken to address them, while also highlighting positive operational achievements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public perception and the ethical obligation to disclose potentially negative information accurately and transparently. KGHM Polska Miedz, as a publicly traded entity, operates under strict regulatory frameworks that mandate fair disclosure and prohibit misleading statements. The pressure to present a favorable image can tempt individuals to downplay or omit critical details, creating an ethical dilemma. Careful judgment is required to balance stakeholder interests, legal obligations, and professional integrity. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to regulatory disclosure requirements. This means acknowledging the identified operational inefficiencies and their potential impact, even if it might temporarily affect public perception or investor sentiment. The justification lies in upholding the principles of corporate governance and investor protection, which are paramount in regulated markets. Specifically, Polish law and relevant EU directives governing financial reporting and market abuse require timely and accurate disclosure of material information that could influence investment decisions. Misrepresenting or omitting such information can lead to severe penalties, including fines and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to selectively highlight only positive operational metrics while omitting or downplaying the identified inefficiencies. This failure stems from a disregard for the principle of full and fair disclosure. Regulatory bodies expect companies to present a balanced view, not just favorable aspects. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the disclosure of these inefficiencies until they become undeniable or are discovered by external parties. This constitutes a breach of timely disclosure obligations and can be construed as market manipulation or an attempt to mislead investors. A third incorrect approach might involve framing the inefficiencies in a way that minimizes their significance without providing concrete data or context, which is a form of misleading communication. All these incorrect approaches violate the spirit and letter of regulations designed to ensure market integrity and protect investors by providing them with the information necessary to make informed decisions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the information's materiality, the applicable regulatory requirements, and the potential ethical implications. Professionals should consult internal compliance departments and legal counsel to ensure all disclosures are accurate, complete, and compliant. Prioritizing ethical conduct and regulatory adherence over short-term reputational gains is crucial for long-term sustainability and trust. Question 14. Assessment of an employee at KGHM Polska Miedz who, while reviewing internal financial projections, discovers a significant, undisclosed positive development that is expected to substantially increase the company's stock value upon public announcement. The employee owns shares in KGHM Polska Miedz. What is the most ethical and legally compliant course of action for this employee? Option A. Sell their KGHM Polska Miedz shares immediately to avoid potential losses if the development is not as significant as initially perceived. Option B. Immediately report the information to KGHM Polska Miedz's compliance department and refrain from any personal trading of KGHM Polska Miedz shares until the information is publicly disclosed. Option C. Hold onto their shares and wait for the information to become public. Then decide whether to sell based on the market reaction. Option D. Discuss the development with close friends and family, advising them to consider buying KGHM Polska Miedz shares before the public announcement. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the information to KGHM Polska Miedz's compliance department and refrain from any personal trading of KGHM Polska Miedz shares until the information is publicly disclosed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at KGHM Polska Miedz due to the potential conflict between personal gain and the company's ethical standards and regulatory obligations. The core of the dilemma lies in the employee's awareness of non-public information that could significantly impact the company's financial performance and, consequently, the value of their own investments. Navigating this requires a deep understanding of insider trading regulations and KGHM internal code of conduct. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the information to the appropriate internal channels and refraining from any personal trading based on this knowledge. This upholds the principles of fair markets, protects KGHM Polska Miedz from potential regulatory scrutiny and reputational damage, and aligns with the employee's duty of loyalty to the employer. Specifically, Polish law, as governed by the Act on Trading in Financial Instruments, prohibits the use of inside information for trading. Furthermore, KGHM internal policies, likely mirroring best practices and regulatory expectations, would mandate such disclosure and prohibit personal trading on material non-public information to maintain market integrity and corporate governance. An incorrect approach would be to trade on this information before its public release. This constitutes insider trading, a serious offense under Polish law, carrying severe penalties including fines and imprisonment. Ethically, it breaches the employee's fiduciary duty to KGHM and undermines the trust placed in them. Another incorrect approach is to discuss the information with friends or family who might then trade. This also constitutes insider trading, as the employee is facilitating the unlawful use of inside information, and they could be held liable for aiding and abetting. Finally, doing nothing and hoping the information doesn't become public while continuing to hold the shares without disclosing the potential impact is also problematic. While not direct trading, it represents a failure to act ethically and in accordance with potential disclosure obligations if the information is indeed material, and the employee has a duty to report it internally. Professionals facing such situations should employ a clear decision-making framework. 1. Identify the nature of the information. Is it material and non-public? 2. Consult internal policies and codes of conduct. What are KGHM-specific rules regarding inside information and trading? 3. Seek guidance from the compliance department or legal counsel. When in doubt, always ask for clarification. 4. Prioritize ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. Personal gain should never supersede these. 5. Act with integrity and transparency. Report concerns and refrain from any actions that could be perceived as unethical or illegal. Question 15. Which approach would be most appropriate for a KGHM Polska Miedz environmental compliance officer who discovers that recent operational changes have led to a significant, but not yet legally reportable, increase in certain emissions, and the quarterly report is due soon, with pressure from management to present a positive financial outlook? Option A. Inform management of the observed increase in emissions, but suggest delaying the report until further analysis can be conducted, without explicitly stating the potential negative impact. Option B. Report the emissions as if they were within the previous reporting period's parameters, assuming the increase is temporary and will self-correct. Option C. Omit any mention of the increased emissions in the quarterly report to avoid negative financial implications and wait until the emissions legally require reporting. Option D. Accurately report the observed increase in emissions in the quarterly report, even if it is not yet legally reportable, and initiate internal discussions on mitigation strategies. Correct answer is D. Accurately report the observed increase in emissions in the quarterly report, even if it is not yet legally reportable, and initiate internal discussions on mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet targets can create an environment where shortcuts are tempting, but adherence to ethical principles and legal frameworks is paramount for KGHM Polska Miedz's reputation and sustainability. Careful judgment is required to navigate the conflict between short-term gains and the integrity of reporting practices. The correct approach involves transparently and accurately reporting the environmental impact, even if it negatively affects short-term financial performance. This aligns with the principles of corporate social responsibility and the regulatory framework governing environmental reporting in Poland, which mandates truthful disclosure of environmental data. By prioritizing accurate reporting, KGHM Polska Miedz upholds its commitment to ethical conduct, builds trust with stakeholders, and avoids potential legal repercussions and reputational damage associated with misleading information. This approach demonstrates a commitment to sustainable business practices and responsible resource management, which are increasingly important for investor confidence and public perception. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying or omitting negative environmental data would constitute a violation of Polish environmental reporting regulations. Such an action would be ethically unsound, as it deceives stakeholders about the true environmental footprint of the company's operations. This could lead to significant fines, legal challenges, and severe damage to KGHM Polska Miedz's brand image, potentially impacting its ability to secure future financing or maintain its social license to operate. Another incorrect approach, which is to seek external advice without disclosing the full context of the environmental data, is also problematic. While seeking advice is generally good practice, doing so with incomplete or misleading information prevents the advisor from providing appropriate guidance and could inadvertently lead to further noncompliance. It also suggests an attempt to circumvent proper reporting procedures rather than address the issue directly. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of relevant regulations, a commitment to ethical principles, and open communication. Professionals should first identify the core issue and the applicable legal and ethical standards. They should then gather all relevant facts accurately and without bias. If there is a conflict between business objectives and ethical/regulatory requirements, the latter must always take precedence. Seeking advice from internal compliance departments or legal counsel, with full and transparent disclosure of all facts, is a crucial step in navigating complex situations and ensuring adherence to best practices. Question 16. Implementation of a new strategic partnership for KGHM Polska Miedz has resulted in a significant, yet not yet publicly announced, increase in the projected value of a key subsidiary. A mid-level manager at KGHM Polska Miedz, who is not directly involved in the partnership negotiations but has overheard discussions containing these projections, is considering whether to purchase shares in the subsidiary's parent company before the announcement. What is the most appropriate course of action for the manager? Option A. Disregard the overheard information, assuming it is not yet finalized or significant enough to impact the market. Option B. Immediately report the overheard information and the potential conflict of interest to the KGHM Polska Miedz Compliance Department and refrain from any share transactions related to the subsidiary or its parent company. Option C. Proceed with purchasing shares in the parent company, as the information was overheard and not directly disclosed, and the manager is not a senior executive. Option D. Subtly mention the positive outlook of the subsidiary to a close friend who is an active investor, suggesting they might want to look into it. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the overheard information and the potential conflict of interest to the KGHM Polska Miedz Compliance Department and refrain from any share transactions related to the subsidiary or its parent company. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between KGHM Polska Miedz's commitment to ethical conduct and the potential for personal gain through the misuse of privileged information. The core of the challenge lies in navigating the boundaries of professional responsibility when faced with an opportunity that could benefit oneself or close associates, but at the expense of fair market practices and regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to uphold integrity and prevent any perception or reality of insider trading. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the potential conflict of interest and refraining from any action that could be construed as using non-public information for personal advantage. This aligns with the principles of corporate governance and ethical conduct expected of employees in publicly traded companies. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit and letter of Polish regulations concerning market abuse and insider dealing, which mandate that individuals in possession of inside information must not exploit it for personal gain or disclose it to others who might do so. By reporting, the individual demonstrates transparency and allows KGHM Polska Miedz to manage the situation in accordance with legal and ethical standards, safeguarding the company's reputation and the integrity of the financial markets. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investment based on the tip, even if it seems like a minor or indirect benefit. This would constitute a direct violation of insider trading regulations, as it involves trading on material non-public information. Such an action undermines market fairness and can lead to severe legal penalties for both the individual and potentially the company. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the information as insignificant or unlikely to be acted upon. This demonstrates a failure to appreciate the gravity of possessing potentially market-moving information and the strict prohibitions against its use. It shows a lack of due diligence in understanding one's ethical and legal obligations. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to subtly hint at the information to a trusted friend or family member without directly advising them to trade. While seemingly an attempt to circumvent direct personal involvement, this still constitutes an unlawful disclosure of inside information. The intent to benefit indirectly or to enable others to benefit from such information is still a breach of regulatory requirements and ethical principles. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of one's fiduciary duties and the relevant regulatory framework. When faced with information that appears to be material and non-public, the immediate steps should be: 1. Recognize the potential for a conflict of interest or insider trading. 2. Cease any contemplation of personal or indirect benefit from this information. 3. Consult the company's internal policies and procedures regarding the handling of sensitive information and conflicts of interest. 4. Report the situation to the appropriate internal authority, e.g., compliance department, legal counsel, or supervisor, for guidance and action. This structured approach ensures that decisions are made with full awareness of legal and ethical implications, prioritizing integrity and compliance. Question 17. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for a position at KGHM Polska Miedz has recently come into possession of material, non-public information regarding a significant upcoming strategic partnership that could substantially impact the company's stock price. The candidate is aware that this information is not yet public knowledge and has not been disclosed by KGHM. How should the candidate proceed with the remainder of the hiring assessment? Option A. Share the non-public information with other candidates during the assessment to foster a collaborative and informed discussion about KGHM future. Option B. Proceed with the assessment as normal, assuming the information will not influence their performance or decisions during the interview process. Option C. Discreetly use the non-public information to subtly highlight their understanding of KGHM's strategic direction during the assessment, framing it as insightful analysis. Option D. Immediately disclose the existence of the non-public information and the potential conflict of interest to the KGHM Human Resources Department, and recuse themselves from any further assessment activities that could be influenced by this information. Correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the existence of the non-public information and the potential conflict of interest to the KGHM Human Resources Department, and recuse themselves from any further assessment activities that could be influenced by this information. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a candidate's personal financial interests and their duty to act in the best interest of KGHM Polska Miedz. The assessment process is designed to identify individuals who can uphold the company's ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The core of the challenge lies in navigating potential conflicts of interest and ensuring that all actions are transparent and aligned with KGHM Code of Conduct and relevant Polish regulations concerning insider trading and market abuse. Careful judgment is required to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, which can damage both individual reputation and company standing. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate KGHM personnel, such as the HR department or compliance officer, and recusing oneself from any further involvement in the assessment process that could be influenced by the non-public information. This demonstrates integrity and a commitment to ethical conduct. Specifically, Polish law, such as the Act on Trading in Financial Instruments, and KGHM internal policies would mandate such disclosure and recusal to prevent market abuse and maintain fair market practices. By acting proactively and transparently, the candidate upholds their fiduciary duty and adheres to the principles of good corporate governance. An incorrect approach would be to remain silent and proceed with the assessment, hoping the information will not be used. This constitutes a failure to disclose a material conflict of interest, which is a direct violation of ethical principles and potentially Polish regulations regarding insider information. It creates an environment where the candidate's judgment could be compromised, leading to decisions that are not in the best interest of KGHM. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to leverage the non-public information for personal gain outside of the assessment process, such as by trading KGHM shares. This would be a clear breach of insider trading laws and KGHM Code of Conduct, leading to severe legal and professional consequences. It represents a deliberate act of market abuse and a profound ethical failure. A third incorrect approach would be to discuss the non-public information with other candidates or employees, even if not for personal gain. This constitutes the unlawful disclosure of inside information, which can have a destabilizing effect on the market and is strictly prohibited by financial regulations. It undermines the integrity of the assessment process and the company's commitment to confidentiality. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of KGHM Code of Conduct and relevant Polish financial regulations. When faced with a potential conflict of interest or access to non-public information, the immediate steps should be: 1. Identify the potential conflict or information. 2. Assess its materiality and potential impact. 3. Consult KGHM internal policies and relevant laws. 4. Disclose the situation promptly and transparently to the designated authority within KGHM. 5. Follow the guidance provided by KGHM and recuse oneself from any decision-making or activities that could be influenced by the information. This systematic approach ensures compliance, protects the company, and maintains personal and professional integrity. Question 18. During the evaluation of a new potential supplier for critical raw materials, an employee at KGHM Polska Miedz discovers they have a close personal friendship with a senior executive at the supplier company. This friendship predates the employee's tenure at KGHM and is characterized by regular social contact. The employee is part of the team responsible for assessing and recommending suppliers. What is the most appropriate course of action for the employee? Option A. Continue with the evaluation as normal and only disclose the relationship if specifically asked about potential conflicts of interest. Option B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and the compliance department and recuse themselves from all aspects of the supplier evaluation process. Option C. Proceed with the evaluation, ensuring the decision is based solely on objective criteria and assume the personal relationship will not influence their judgment. Option D. Discreetly favor the supplier during the evaluation process, believing the personal connection will ultimately benefit KGHM through a stronger partnership. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and the compliance department, and recuse themselves from all aspects of the supplier evaluation process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a potential business opportunity and the ethical obligation to maintain transparency and avoid conflicts of interest. KGHM Polska Miedz, as a publicly traded entity, is subject to stringent regulations regarding insider information and fair market practices. The employee's personal relationship with a key decision-maker, a potential supplier, creates a significant risk of perceived or actual impropriety, which could undermine investor confidence and violate regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising KGHM integrity or violating applicable laws. The correct approach involves immediate and full disclosure of the personal relationship to the appropriate internal channels, such as a compliance officer or direct supervisor, and recusal from any decision-making processes related to the potential supplier. This upholds the principle of transparency and proactively mitigates the risk of a conflict of interest. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing capital markets and corporate governance, emphasize the importance of avoiding situations where personal interests could influence professional judgment. By disclosing and recusing, the employee demonstrates adherence to these principles and protects KGHM from potential regulatory scrutiny and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the evaluation without disclosing the relationship, hoping that personal bias would not influence the decision. This failure to disclose is a direct violation of ethical codes and potentially regulatory mandates concerning conflicts of interest. It creates an environment where decisions might be made based on personal connections rather than objective merit, which is detrimental to fair business practices and could lead to legal repercussions for both the employee and KGHM. Another incorrect approach would be to subtly favor the supplier without explicit disclosure, believing that the relationship is a minor factor. This is ethically unsound and still constitutes a conflict of interest, as it introduces an unfair advantage. Even if no direct financial gain is sought, such actions can distort competitive processes and erode trust within the organization and with external stakeholders. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation and hope it goes unnoticed. This passive stance is irresponsible and fails to address the potential ethical and regulatory risks. It leaves KGHM vulnerable to accusations of impropriety and demonstrates a lack of professional integrity on the part of the employee. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves identifying potential conflicts of interest early, understanding the relevant internal policies and external regulations, seeking guidance from compliance departments, and acting with transparency and integrity. When in doubt, erring on the side of caution and full disclosure is always the most prudent course of action. Question 19. Process analysis reveals that a KGHM Polska Miedz employee, privy to sensitive, non-public information regarding an upcoming strategic partnership that is expected to significantly impact the company's stock price, is considering making a personal investment in KGHM Polska Miedz shares before the information becomes public. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for this employee? Option A. Refrain from making any investment based on the confidential information and avoid disclosing it to any third parties. Option B. Share the confidential information with a close friend, encouraging them to invest in KGHM Polska Miedz shares before the announcement. Option C. Wait for a period of time after the information becomes public before making any investment to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Option D. Proceed with the personal investment in KGHM Polska Miedz shares, as it is a direct opportunity to benefit from knowledge gained through one's employment. The correct answer is A. Refrain from making any investment based on the confidential information and avoid disclosing it to any third parties. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at KGHM Polska Miedz due to the potential conflict between personal gain and the company's ethical standards and regulatory obligations. The core of the dilemma lies in leveraging confidential information obtained through one's professional role for personal benefit, which can undermine trust, create an unfair market advantage, and violate insider trading regulations. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and legally. The correct approach involves prioritizing ethical conduct and regulatory compliance above personal advantage. This means refraining from using the non-public information for any personal investment decisions. Specifically, the employee must not trade on the information or disclose it to others who might trade on it. This aligns with the principles of corporate governance, fiduciary duty, and the specific regulations governing financial markets and insider trading, which are designed to ensure market integrity and fair competition. Adhering to these principles protects both the individual employee from legal repercussions and KGHM Polska Miedz from reputational damage and regulatory penalties. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investment based on the confidential information. This constitutes insider trading, a serious offense under Polish law and international financial regulations. It violates the trust placed in the employee by KGHM Polska Miedz and breaches the duty of confidentiality. Such an action creates an unfair advantage over other market participants who do not have access to the same information, thereby undermining the fairness and transparency of the financial markets. Another incorrect approach is to disclose the confidential information to a friend or family member with the intention of them making a profit. This is also considered insider trading, as it facilitates the illegal use of material non-public information. The employee would be liable for tipping off others, and the recipient of the information would also be subject to penalties. This action demonstrates a disregard for KGHM Polska Miedz's internal policies and external regulatory requirements. A third incorrect approach would be to delay the investment decision indefinitely without taking any action or seeking guidance. While seemingly passive, this approach still carries risks. If the employee continues to hold the information and is perceived as having the potential to act on it, it can create an ongoing ethical cloud. More importantly, it fails to address the core issue of possessing and potentially misusing confidential information. The professional reasoning framework should involve immediate recognition of the ethical and legal implications, consulting KGHM Polska Miedz's internal compliance policies, and potentially seeking advice from the company's legal or compliance department before taking any action. The paramount principle is to act with integrity and in accordance with all applicable laws and regulations. Question 20. Performance analysis shows that a key operational metric for a KGHM Polska Miedz project is significantly below the projected target for the current quarter. The project manager is under considerable pressure to demonstrate progress and meet financial projections. They are considering adjusting the reported figures to align with the target, believing this will avoid immediate scrutiny and allow time to rectify the operational issues. What is the most appropriate course of action for the project manager? Option A. Adjust the reported figures to meet the target, with the intention of correcting them in subsequent reporting periods once the operational issues are resolved. Option B. Request an extension for the reporting deadline, hoping that the operational issues will resolve themselves before the report is due. Option C. report the actual performance data accurately, clearly outlining the reasons for the shortfall and proposing a plan to address the issues. Option D, omit the specific metric from the report, focusing only on other areas where performance is meeting expectations. The correct answer is C. Report the actual performance data accurately, clearly outlining the reasons for the shortfall and proposing a plan to address the issues. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at KGHM Polska Miedz due to the potential conflict between achieving performance targets and adhering to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. The core of the challenge lies in the temptation to misrepresent data to meet demanding expectations, which could have significant repercussions for the company, its stakeholders, and the individual's career. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation, prioritizing integrity over short-term gains. The correct approach involves transparently reporting the actual performance data, even if it falls short of the target, and proactively communicating the reasons for the shortfall. This aligns with the principles of honesty, integrity, and accountability expected of employees in any regulated industry, including mining. Specifically, Polish law and internal KGHM policies would likely mandate accurate reporting of operational data. Adhering to these principles ensures that management can make informed decisions based on reliable information, fostering a culture of trust and compliance. This approach upholds the company's reputation and avoids potential legal or financial penalties associated with fraudulent reporting. An incorrect approach of manipulating the data to appear as though targets are met would constitute a serious ethical and regulatory breach. This misrepresentation undermines the integrity of performance analysis, which is crucial for strategic planning and operational improvements. Such an action could be viewed as fraud or misrepresentation under Polish commercial law, leading to severe disciplinary action, including termination and potential legal consequences for the individual and the company. Furthermore, it erodes trust within the organization and damages the company's credibility with investors and regulatory bodies. Another incorrect approach of ignoring the shortfall and hoping it goes unnoticed is equally problematic. While it avoids direct manipulation, it still represents a failure to uphold professional responsibilities. This passive approach can be interpreted as negligence or a lack of commitment to accurate reporting, which can still lead to poor decision-making by management based on incomplete or misleading information. It also misses the opportunity to identify and address underlying issues contributing to the performance gap. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear understanding of the company's ethical code and relevant regulations. When faced with a discrepancy between expected and actual performance, the first step is to verify the data's accuracy. If the data is accurate and shows a shortfall, the next step is to analyze the root causes of this underperformance. The final and crucial step is to communicate the findings transparently and constructively to superiors, offering potential solutions or mitigation strategies. This process prioritizes ethical conduct, regulatory compliance, and effective problem solving.